Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region. This is Brandon from freestatecolorado.com with your weekly news roundup for October 29th, 2023. Nearly every week, I take a look at some news stories, articles, and headlines from across our great state. And of course, you can find all of the links, interviews, articles, and more at freestatecolorado.com. If you want to find any more information about what's talked about this week, as well as some interviews with some of our school board candidates, leaders from across the state, and some original reporting. So, here we go again. October 29th, we got some snow on the ground, back into winter seasons. Hope you get your snow shovels ready because here it comes. And went from feeling pretty nice last week to feeling like fall and now feeling like winter. So that's Colorado for you. So let's start looking at some headlines, see what we got going on this week. Now, I have talked about the Loveland effort to eliminate sales tax on food previously, but I want to bring this up. Of course, right now it's election time. Voters have their ballots. You got to get them in by the November 7th. By 7 p.m. is when your ballots need to be turned in or go vote in person on November 7th. But I think it's really important to bring this up again. Loveland voters could eliminate sales tax on many groceries. And of course, the city warns it could cut public services. Those greedy public servants want to take more of your tax money. And I mean, come on, the tax on groceries, the tax on food is probably the most despicable form of taxation there is. As you know, taxation is theft. To tell somebody who's trying to buy groceries, who's trying to get food for their family, that they have to pay more, have to pay off the government, is totally and utterly ridiculous and completely unnecessary, as we've seen in other cities across Colorado. So this is from CBSNews.com. Voters in the city of Loveland will soon decide whether or not to rid of sales taxes on groceries consumed at home. Proposition 300 is on the November ballot and leaves it up to voters to decide whether or not they want to keep paying the 3% tax on their goods. Now, that's a lot of money. It doesn't seem like it, but you add up 3% in groceries, added to the cost every year for people who've lived in Loveland their whole lives. I mean, it's a lot of money. Let the people buy their food, buy their fruits and vegetables and meat without having to pay the government. Let Us Vote Loveland, a group of voters in the city, advocated for the initiative. George Garklovs, a resident and supporter, said the idea is to return dollars to those who are lower income and in greater need of the money. There's a lot of folks that have a tough time keeping up with the cost of living, and every little bit helps, Garklovs said. The sales tax would only be removed from certain groceries deemed for consumption at home. Other foods, including those prepared at restaurants and more, would still be taxed. Well, it's a start, I guess. I don't think any food should be taxed, but this is definitely a start. Creating this proposal was an ethical thing, Garklov said. It is a regressive tax. It hurts people at lower levels much more than other folks, lower income levels. Garklov suggested the average shopper would save hundreds of dollars a year if the proposal was approved. However, the city officials warn that eliminating the tax would come at a cost to public services many enjoy. We are able to forecast a $10.5 million revenue reduction in 2024 if we make that exclusion, said Brian Walds, Chief Financial Officer for Loveland. That kind of revenue reduction would have a big impact on our general fund. Well, read the article if you want more information. I think Loveland voters need to vote yes on Proposition 300 to lower their grocery bills, to save money, and to get the government out of controlling their food by increasing the cost on it. All right, let's move on. An extremely sad story here in Colorado. Not too surprising, of course, violence, crime, theft has been on the rise. And it's very unfortunate to see that Colorado's domestic violence fatalities hit record high for second year in a row. Yikes. Not a good situation. Absolutely tragic. And of course, this happens at the same time that our state legislature and local municipalities across Colorado are trying to restrict the ability of individuals to defend themselves. The reality is that a gun, a firearm, is the only tool available to protect a 90-pound woman from a 200-pound guy. The only tool available to equalize the playing field and help the elderly protect themselves against the young, the individual against a group or a gang of people, and of course, somebody who's maybe disabled to be able to protect themselves against somebody who's not. Domestic violence deaths in Colorado spiked to a record high in 2022 for the second year in a row. according to a report published Monday by the state's Domestic Fatality Review Board. 94 people died in domestic violence incidents in Colorado in 2022, the highest number recorded since the state began tracking the deaths in 2016, according to the 75-page report. That count includes victims, perpetrators, and bystanders and shows a large increase in the number of bystanders killed in domestic violence incidents last year. So, of course, this is absolutely horrible. It is terrible. You can't not blame the COVID policies on some level for this tear in the fabric of of society, of the social system in which people live, pushed a lot of people over the edge. Unfortunately, hard economic times that we're seeing doesn't necessarily make the situation better, but what would make it better is for women, for every individual really to learn how to defend themselves, to become proficient with a firearm, get trained, and protect yourself and your family. Let's move on. From Complete Colorado, page 2. Now, CompleteColorado.com is a website you should be checking out every day to give you some headlines and news stories from a liberty perspective. This is from the great liberty leader Natalie Menten, a good friend of Free State, Colorado. Jeffco mails overdue TABOR refunds, bonus propaganda included. So if you don't know, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights gives people in Colorado money back if the government collects too much. Now, this does include Jefferson County, which just sent checks to property owners across the county. So pretty exciting for people there to get maybe $100, $200 in the mail that they weren't necessarily expecting. But of course, the Jefferson County authoritarians in the government are using this opportunity to propagandize the people and try and tell them, hey, we're giving you this money back. It's your tax money, but maybe you should let us keep it. Let's see the article here. Refund checks for the overpayment of 2022 property started hitting the mailboxes of Jefferson County residents just this week. Better late than never, I suppose. Included with the checks is a propaganda letter from the county, whining about all the services they'd sure love to provide, but can't because of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights TABOR. What the letter doesn't mention is that county commissioners spent around $250,000 to mail out the checks rather than simply lowering property taxes. More on that later. One Edgewater resident reports receiving $98.27, while a taxpayer in Arvada got $101.48. My own refund is $81.89. Admittedly, it's nice to get a rebate or refund check in the mail from the government. Even better is not overpaying the government in the first place. Thanks to our constitutional Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, TABOR, in Colorado we have protection from runaway government growth. TABOR allows moderate growth while keeping excesses in check. The state gets to keep taxes capped by inflation percentage and population growth. Revenue overcollected must be returned to taxpayers unless voters approve giving up their refunds, like in the case of Proposition HH. Vote no on Proposition HH. TABOR also includes taxpayer safeguards at the local government level, which encompasses over 2,800 municipalities, special districts, school districts, and counties. TABOR has a slightly different formula for local governments, allowing tax revenue increase by inflation rate plus local growth, construction, or school enrollment. TABOR isn't the only taxpayer protection in Colorado. We also have the 5.5% annual levy law, written in Colorado Revised Statutes 29.1.301. The law was written in 1913, making it 110 years older than our Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. The law restricts the amount of property tax revenue that a local government may collect each year. Unfortunately, those taxpayer protections don't extend to all governments like TABOR does. Home rule jurisdictions, a common classification for many cities in Colorado, aren't included in the property tax cap. Sadly, many voters have been tricked into giving up some of their local TABOR rights and/or the annual levy law protections when they voted for ballot issues. The usual suspect ballot language written by government bodies is something like, quote, allow government to spend and retain all revenue, notwithstanding Article 10, Section 20, or any other law. Poof! With that vague and misleading language, voters gave up their rights forever, though it's verifiable that TABOR was never meant to allow permanently giving up rights, instead limiting those actions to 4 years. So definitely check this out. Natalie Menten is one of our Liberty leaders, definitely a voice in Jefferson County Liberty movement. And this is very interesting to see how Taxpayer Bill of Rights works for TABOR if you're new to the issue, but also how the government of Jefferson County is trying to convince voters to give up their tax refunds. Because of course they are. They want our money, but it doesn't belong to them. It belongs to us. Well, let's move on. Wanted to share this article. It's from a couple weeks ago, but didn't talk about it. And it's just another example of how dangerous public schools have become. Many parents of a certain generation believe that public schools are the same kind of institutions that they went to when they were kids. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Fortunately, stories of abuse, stories of teachers or bureaucrats at the school district trying to manipulate things in their favor and against parents is absolutely frightening and needs to be exposed to everybody out there. Whether you have kids in school or not, it's important to understand what's happening in your community. So, this is in Fort Collins, Colorado. Families of 5 children, police say were abused by former bus attendant sue PSD elders. A civil lawsuit against Poudre School District, Colorado Department of Education, and the State Board of Education has been filed in U.S. District Court by the families of 5 children police say were harmed by a former school bus paraprofessional. The civil lawsuit filed Friday in Denver is separate from the criminal proceedings against Tyler Zanella, a former bus attendant who is facing 164 charges, including 34 felony counts of assault against at risk victims, for incidents police say took place while he was working on PSD buses transporting children with special needs to and from school. Police have identified at least 11 named victims, primarily nonverbal autistic children, in the criminal case through video surveillance from buses Zanella was assigned to last spring. So the article here goes through some of the allegations, some of the issues. It is absolutely horrific to see what happened. What makes it worse is that there's a possibility that people in the school district knew about this abuse and either didn't report it or didn't expose it. So, towards the end of the article here, the Colorado Department of Education and the State Board of Education were also named as defendants based on their roles in overseeing PSD and other school districts in the state. Another 50 people, identified simply as does, were also listed as defendants. Those were other employees of the school district and witnesses whose names were redacted in police reports who had knowledge of the abuse, who failed to report it or take action to prevent it. So, did you hear that? I mean, you want to talk about institutionalized problems. Yeah, there's a bad individual there, somebody with a history of abuse, as we'll see here shortly. But there's 50 more people in the school district who had knowledge of the abuse, 50 people who had knowledge of the abuse who failed to report it or take action to prevent it. I mean, it kind of should shake your faith in the idea of these public schools as institutions of trust. Let's look at the actual complaint, which you can find this link here at freestatecolorado.com. So this is the complaint here. You can see does 1 through 50, who are presently unknown persons. Zanella, an individual, that's the person, Tyler Zanella, who's accused of the abuse, as well as the school district. So families, guardians and friends of these people bringing this suit against them. So let's take a look at it here. On or about August 22nd, on or about August 2022, PSD hired defendant Zanella. Defendant Zanella was hired for one of the most important jobs in the Poudre School District. That was as a paraprofessional to assist children who could not assist themselves. Children with special needs who needed a caring and helping hand to merely get to and from school where they receive schooling and could potentially help them live a life to their full potential. The PSD, through their own job description for a paraprofessional such as defendant Zanella, articulated that the position was to ensure students are safe during the loading, unloading, transporting, and transferring on buses. Plaintiffs are informed that defendant Zella was hired by PSD despite having knowledge of defendant Zanella's lengthy criminal background that included a guilty plea for child abuse in 2012, multiple DUI arrests and convictions, one of which occurred a mere week before he began his employment at PSD. And this guy's working on school buses. And he just got a DUI, multiple DUIs, the one a week before he started employment, shuttling children back and forth on buses. Not only that, but he had a guilty plea for child abuse, and they hired him anyway. Plaintiffs are further informed that Amanda Tate, who was the Poudre School District transportation dispatcher, an agent of the governmental entity defendants, and who was in a personal relationship with defendant Zanella, may have been instrumental in his hiring. Well, there you go. So, how bad are the schools? Well, somebody could get their friend hired, their romantic interest in hired potentially, even though they have a history of child abuse, multiple DUIs. Hey, they could still get them a job shuttling children on school buses. Absolutely and utterly terrible. So you can read this entire complaint. I'll have the link, of course, where this weekly roundup's found on the freestatecolorado.com website. But people, you got to be aware of what's going on in public schools. It is bad. It is bad out there. I mean, it's literally every single week for an entire year. You can find a news story, a new news story talking about what's going on in public schools, whether it's abuse, whether it's a cover up, whether it's parents conspiring against whether it's teachers conspiring against parents, excuse me. I mean, absolutely and utterly horrific state that Colorado public schools are set in. I think it's time now more than ever for school choice. That's something I'll be getting into in the future. Moving on, denvergazette.com/out there Colorado. Colorado ranks last nationwide in personal and residential safety. Yikes. Yikes. So we already saw an article earlier this week about the domestic violence has been increasing. Deaths from domestic violence has been increasing. And now a new report comes out showing that Colorado is last nationwide in personal and residential safety. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. You know, somebody like me, born and raised here, people who've been here for a long time, it's shocking that that's even possible. I mean, because you hear stories about Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia. I mean, all these big cities in these states. Now, Colorado is the last in the country. Oh my gosh. Colorado ranks last nationwide in personal and residential safety. The results of a recent data analysis conducted by Wallet Hub are sure to shock some Coloradans, with the Centennial State being ranked last in the country in terms of personal and residential safety. This category of data included 20 different metrics, mostly related to crimes and drug abuse stats on the per capita basis, while also including things like suicide rate, bullying incidents, and number of local hate groups. Yikes. Personal and residential safety wasn't the only type of safety concerns that were considered in the Wallet Hub analysis, with other categories of metrics including financial safety, road safety, workplace safety, and emergency preparedness. While Colorado ranked the lowest when it came to personal and residential safety, the state also ranked poorly in terms of workplace safety, 45th. So, I mean, this is absolutely horrific to think that personal and residential safety, Colorado might be one of the worst places in the country for it. And of course, our state government, our local municipalities are trying to disarm law abiding citizens by infringing on our right to keep and bear arms and our ability to defend ourselves. The right to self defense is inalienable. Individuals across Colorado, you have a right to defend yourself against these criminals who are violating your personal and residential safety. These politicians who are trying to make it more difficult for individuals to protect themselves and their families are totally and utterly out of touch. And they're the people responsible, at least on some level, for this lack of safety we're seeing in Colorado. Let's go ahead and move on. So, how bad is crime in Colorado? Well, even letter carriers, postal workers are facing assaults, robberies, increasing 5 times this year over 2022. Yikes. This is from denverpost.com. Metro Denver letter carriers rally as assaults, robberies increase 5 times this year over 2022. The Colorado State Association of Letter Carriers has tracked more crimes against postal workers in 2023. That is absolutely terrible. It's so crazy to think that Colorado's become such an unsafe place, the Denver metro area in particular, that even people delivering the mail are getting assaulted and robbed. U.S. Service letter carriers from across Metro Denver rallied at the Aurora, Maine post office on Tuesday to raise awareness for increasing assaults and robberies and a call for more federal prosecution of the crimes. About 30 letter carriers stood outside the post office Tuesday night, listening to state and national union leaders and chanting, "Enough is enough." The Colorado State Association of Letter Carriers has tracked 10 assaults and robberies on Metro letter carriers in 2023. President Richard Byrne said Tuesday, up from 2 cases reported to the group in 2022. So, yikes. Yikes. Denver letter carrier Ken Duell worked for the Postal Service for 30 years before he was robbed and shot at during his regular route in South Park Hill in January. "I've had this route for 16 years, Duell said. This is the first time something like this has happened." Duell was almost done with a loop on his route near East 19th Avenue and Kearney Street on January 28th when he saw a car parked next to his mail truck. While it's not unusual for customers to stop by his truck to drop off mail, Duell said he found his truck door was open and a young man or teenager was stealing packages and throwing into the car, which held 2 other men. Duell shouted at the group, and as the car took off, he tried to grab the packages the third man was stealing. As they struggled, Duell hit the man in the head with a package scanner, and the man pulled out a gun and shot at Duell. Wow. Duell was uninjured but shaken by the encounter. The Postal Inspection Service is offering a $50,000 reward for information in the case. Yikes. So this is the sad, sorry situation in the Denver metro area. People be on guard, learn how to defend yourselves and protect your families. Let's move on. KDVR.com. I thought this was interesting. Of course, with all the snow we're seeing and the bad weather, can't help but think about people who are homeless or living out in the streets, unable to have a place at home. But so I thought this was interesting. Of course, the homeless issue in the Denver metro area across Colorado is one of the major issues we've been seeing throughout the year and more. But this is an exclusive report here. Denver employee reports migrants in encampments. Wow. A whistleblower who works with migrants for the city of Denver is sounding the alarm about the coming cold front, saying migrant families with children could be days away from staying in cold weather once their shelter stay ends. As of Tuesday, Denver has served more than 25,000 migrants, and more than 3,200 of them have been bused here from Texas since May 18th. As of Tuesday, 2,300 were sheltered in non-city owned facilities. The city employee did not want to be identified because of fear of retaliation, but told Fox 31 that this operation to care for migrants started with good intentions and has now become a loop of desperation. "I'm just honestly afraid that somebody is going to die," the city employee said. On Tuesday, migrants were seen setting up encampments on the northwest side of the city. Since last winter, city employees have been processing migrants who arrive here. Their primary positions were like eligibility checks for people getting food stamps and things like that, the city employee said. The job was one the city employee said was too much for the city to handle, despite its intentions. Fox 31's source was compelled to come forward with a story of children, babies, and families timing out of shelters and who could be forced to live in tents or worse. 20-day-old babies outside. There's 2 and 3-year-olds, the city employee said. They don't even necessarily have tents out there, just kind of a tarp with a mattress on the ground. Prospects are grim for the migrants, according to the city employee. It is this loop of despair that's not. It just shows no sign of changing, and it's going to get worse. Yikes. So it is a rough situation out there. Not only is, I mean, it's no surprise, right? You go to downtown Denver, you see the crazy homeless camps set up everywhere, the trash, the pollution, the problems of the people out there. And of course, it's not too surprising with 25,000 migrants coming into Denver. Where are they going to go? I mean, a lot of them are on the streets, and it's creating a really rough situation. Let's go ahead and move on. DenverPost.com, Colorado Republicans unveil Proposition HH alternatives, some of which overlap with ballot measure. So the big point of this article, I think, is that Proposition HH is so entirely unnecessary that it doesn't even need to be on the ballot. There's so many other solutions to lower property taxes to provide meaningful property tax relief to people in Colorado without giving up our tax refund money. Colorado's Republican lawmakers said Wednesday that they were pushing their way into the conversation on property taxes. just as voters are weighing in on Proposition HH by demanding a special session to pass several relief measures. Senate Minority Leader Paul Lundeen of Monument made the declaration at a news conference as Republicans, whose political power is at a historic ebb in state government, argued against the multifaceted ballot measure spearheaded by state Democrats. If voters reject Proposition HH in the November 7th election, as the Republican lawmakers hope, Democratic leaders, including Governor Jared Polis, have no clear backup plan. That would leave little time before homeowners are hit in the spring by major property tax increases caused by rising property valuations, averaging 40% at the median. We have a relief. We have to have relief this year, this calendar year, so that they can get property tax relief next year, said Barbara Kirkmeyer, upright and Republican, arguing the failure of HH would leave homeowners in a lurch. So there you go. There are solutions. Of course, the Democrats are resistant because they do not want to give up any of their tax money. They do not want to let you live without paying them rent. So it's very unfortunate. However, Colorado Republicans are standing up for Colorado homeowners, property owners, and doing the right thing here. So there are Proposition HH alternatives. Vote no on Proposition HH, and let's come up with a better plan without taking away tax rebates from people in Colorado. Let's move on. A couple more here. Not a lot of people have been talking about Proposition II, also on this November ballot. Really bad initiative, and just wanted to bring it up. This is from the mountainmail.com. Vote no on Proposition II. Dear editor, I'm writing to express my firm opposition to Proposition II. While this measure may appear well-intentioned, it does not serve the best interests of the people of Colorado. In 2020, Colorado voters approved Proposition EE, which increased taxes on tobacco and nicotine products to ensure funding for 10 hours of preschool for every child in the year before they attend kindergarten. These plans included optimistic funding projections with the intention of offering 15 hours of preschool for all children and 30 hours for those at risk of falling behind in school. Regrettably, the reality did not line with these promises. Universal Preschool Colorado is currently grappling with the challenges of meeting its commitments due to limited funding. This has left many families, particularly those with low income, without access to full-time preschool, causing confusion and frustration among affected families. Many parents feel that program pledged more than it delivers, especially concerning full-day preschool. With Proposition II, the legislator hopes to put a Band-Aid on Universal Preschool Colorado. It asks taxpayers to forego a refund this year and accept the burden of higher future tax rates to fund a program that should have been adequately funded at the level approved by voters in Proposition EE. If Proposition HH passes, what will happen next year? What if there isn't the excessive revenue from the increased taxes on tobacco and nicotine products? Will families again be denied access to full-time preschool? I recommend that we vote no on Proposition II and ask our representatives to revisit the Universal Preschool Colorado legislation to ensure adequate funding. So this is from Jerry Rasky in Salida. I do think we should vote no on Proposition II. Of course, it's an issue where people say, yeah, take money from tobacco and give it to preschools. Programs fail. Government programs don't deliver on their promises. They end up costing too much and end up creating a whole new black market for tobacco, which is coming, believe it or not, unless the taxes can be decreased. So vote no on Proposition II. Last article of the week here from Complete Colorado, page 2. Proposition HH hits younger Coloradans hard. Colorado voters have started receiving their ballots. One measure, Proposition HH, asks younger Coloradans like me to increase our tax burden in exchange for tax handouts to wealthier property owners. The proposition would reduce future tax refunds under the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights TABOR in exchange for minimal property tax relief. The benefit to older Coloradans who own homes could be a net positive or negative, depending on their individual circumstances. But for younger, lower income Coloradans trying to get off the ground in an increasingly expensive state, it's a clear loser. If Proposition HH passes, the average household would lose about $5,119 in TABOR refund money over the next 10 years, according to a study by the Common Sense Institute. Meanwhile, a median homeowner's property tax bill would go up some $706 instead of $936 this year, with similar savings thereafter. These cuts could offset some of the loss in tax refunds for homeowners. Renters, however, would only get the downside effects of losing TABOR refund money with no direct benefit from property tax changes. So vote no on Proposition HH. It's a clear loser for people, especially younger people, people who rent, people who don't want to give up their tax refund. We shouldn't have to. We can lower property taxes, as we saw, without losing our tax refund money. Want to mention this great I wanted to mention this great event coming up here in Denver. Denver's premier Liberty Meetup is Liberty on the Rocks. Great place for like-minded, liberty-minded individuals to get together, have some great conversation, and share a drink. The talk here on November 1st, 2023, doors open at 6 p.m., will be on Bitcoin mining, the electrical grid, and energy consumption. So, the Great Independence Institute allows Denver Liberty on the Rocks to use the facility there. It's an awesome meeting room. Definitely want to check it out if you're interested in Bitcoin, if you're interested in the Liberty community, maybe just having good conversation about freedom and philosophy. Join us at Denver Liberty on the Rocks on November 1st. Doors open at 6 p.m. Talk will start just after 7. Bitcoin mining, the electrical grid, and energy consumption. Should be very interesting. A talk from an electrical engineer. So, very interesting to talk about Bitcoin, have a couple drinks, and let's have some fun. So, you can find this link, of course, at freestatecolorado.com or meetup.com and look for Liberty on the Rocks Denver. Well, that's what I got for this week. Thank you guys very much for joining me. Stay warm out there. Get your snow shovels ready, and happy Halloween.